Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and we've got a pretty substantial PvP change coming through for the reset this week on Retail Shadowlands 9.1. We're going to be seeing some nerfs to mages, priests, and warriors, and as well as the trinket, the Unchained Gladiator's Shackles. So if you've been following along on the channel, you know that I've been covering specializations, what I'm thinking of the changes, what's looking strong, what isn't looking strong. So I wanted to go over these changes and what are the implications overall to the gameplay experience. Is this a change that's going to completely shake your attention away from these specializations, or is it going to be really that relevant, or why does it seem like they're ignoring other options? I'm going to be kind of just theory crafting as to what could possibly be going on. But right now, the most notable change here is the warrior change. Intervene will now only have a 3-second duration in PvP, down from 6 seconds, which means all physical damage attacks will only be redirected to the warrior for 3 seconds. This is, again, increasing the damage that physical damage dealers are dealing by a lot. I mean, this is particularly why warrior was so powerful. Was it could completely negate all attacks from melee DPS. Armor was recently reduced significantly in PvP, which then made melee DPS even stronger. Melee DPS have increased weapons very early on in the season, which benefit them a lot more than healers or ranged DPS to a large degree. So this is going to enable melee DPS outside of warriors more opportunities to find kills. Warrior was pretty much the main formula for most compositions, and we've seen that for some time. Intervene was a large contribution to that. Being able to pair up Die by the Sword with Intervene basically made it so 6 seconds you couldn't attack the warrior and you couldn't attack the person the warrior intervened. So this definitely is going to open up more opportunities. This is a big reason why games could be elongated for some time when a warrior was in a match, but I still think that warrior is likely to remain intact even with only 3 seconds of that significant benefit of time. I think it's still going to be more than enough. They bring a ton of utility and defensive options to be able to keep their team alive, as well as a strong offense. I'm seeing a lot of warriors going after Kyrian now and picking up the 8-second Spear of Bastion. 8 seconds of not being able to escape from a warrior. Sure, you're going to be able to smack them back now a little bit more, but they're going to be able to pin you down still. So I would imagine that warrior is still going to be strong, but this gives options to some other burst melee DPS to be able to find more kill windows, particularly things like rogue mage or double melee. So enhancement shaman warrior, you're going to be able to hammer down a ton more damage. If you're a healer, this change is probably going to be pretty stressful for you, at least if you're a healer playing with a warrior, because now you're not going to be able to rely on the intervene all of the time to save you in those situations, which could really speed things up. The next change is for Shadow Priests. Your Void Volley PvP talent, the damage of its effect is being reduced by 15%. Getting access to Surrender to Madness, getting access to multiple ways to get into Void form meant that you were just splooging out a ton of this purple sludge all over the place and crowd controlling people on a non-diminishing return. So getting the benefit of it not being on diminishing return, which means the players hit by it can't control their characters for an elongated period of time, and doing a lot of damage was probably too much insult to injury. So I'm not really surprised to see this specifically targeted. I can imagine that this is also very prevalent in battleground situations, and you do have to consider not just arena, but as well PvP as a whole. So seeing this nerfed because of, in conjunction of having this amazing crowd control utility tied to it, doing an immense amount of damage along with it, is going to be why this is going down. Now, this isn't the end of the world for Shadow Priest, actually. Shadow Priests are now adapting into a new covenant. I'm seeing a lot of Shadow Priests. I think it was pioneered by Valet over in Europe, but they're going Necrolord and picking up the Necrolord specific legendary, and it basically summons in this little skeleton mage that does a bunch of damage. So your Covenant ability is in some matches upwards of 30% of your overall damage, competing with some things like Ventir Warriors. So right now, Necrolord Shadow Priest is going to make up for this damage more than enough. You're going to get some survivability buffs. You're going to get access to the Bonesmith Heimer. You're going to get crit percent, so you're going to be proccing a lot of apparitions. Your damage is going to be just fine despite this, and still not having a non-crowd control diminishing return control means that you're going to pair up really well with things like rogues and just locking down a bunch of targets all at once, and this is a good tool for anti-melee DPS. But I think Shadow Priest will still likely be in a very good spot as this change. after this change. Now for fire mages, they were introduced a new talent called Ring of Fire, which you just put a circle on the ground and it did a lot of damage. That's pretty straightforward, but apparently it was too much damage than intended when taking into consideration players being stunned inside of it. I think that the main intention of this ability, much like a couple of other honor talents that like the ice wall or the lightning totems, were to prevent players from turtling behind pillars and to try and get area denial. I think that the intention of this spell was to be used as area denial to threaten if people were going to run away, but instead it was just being used to pair up on top of a stun to do overwhelming amounts of damage. This is likely going to be one of the biggest nerfs because fire is so it's so required for its burst damage, and Ring of Fire was filling almost the same spot as Combustion. So you would stun a target, Combustion, stun a target, Ring of Fire, stun a target, Combustion, and you could rotate between the two to always have a significant threat during a stun. And most healers in the game can't really keep up with that pace. So now with this change, maybe not, right? It doesn't say that its damage is being nerfed, but directly it's just saying that it's only going to reapply its damage over time effect less frequently while standing inside of it. So maybe it'll fall off. We'll have to kind of wait and see. For this one could either be a really big one or not that big. And then finally, the changes to the gladiators shackles. It's no longer going to be a curse. So while you were channeling the shackle and you were chaining the target, it was doing damage and stacking up a healing absorb effect. Very powerful trinket. I'd recommend that you go get one, even after this change. The way that this change is read makes it seem like, hey, it's getting nerfed, right? So instead of that channel being a curse, basically it was like a two-part spell. The channel was a curse, but the healing absorb was magic. So healers that don't have decurse would have to wait for the healing absorb to be fully stacked before removing it. Now as a healer, you'll be able to just remove it as soon as you see it start to stack. But DPS that could decurse it can now no longer decurse it, which means there were some teams that had multiple ways of removing a shackle, right? So if I'm a druid DPS, I can remove the shackle effect. And then my healer can also dispel the absorb later on from another shackle if there's more than one. This now means that you can only really remove this once, outside of other tools like having an honor talent for double dispel on priest or revival on a mistweaver monk. So healers that only have one dispel, you're going to be hit the hardest from this because you're not going to be able to have any DPS players on your team assist you with this. So this is kind of a buff to priest and monk. Specifically because they have multiple ways to remove stacks of magic, but druid, you might find this a lot more stressful now. Shaman, you might find this a lot more stressful now because your DPS members, if this goes in the way that it reads, means that this trinket is actually more oppressive, I think, than in its original iteration, just because now DPS can't contribute to it. But either way, another thing to note about these changes is that we don't see a lot of melee DPS really targeted in terms of their offense, right? I think for a lot of players right now, the game feels really fast. I am a bit worried that later on in the game, when we get full gear, that our health pools will be much higher, and our versatility will be much higher, and the game will slow down. So for me, I think what would be best in terms of looking at, is damage actually too spiky in the long run, right? Let's say 3 weeks from now when we've got more of our gear unlocked, you wouldn't want to nerf everybody's damage down and then we unlock this gear and then we're in the spot where the gear is high, HP is high, but damage is low, right? And this is the hard part about actively tuning an RPG in my mind, is because the things that you're tuning are always changing every week as players unlock more power over time. So do you directly tune it now or tune it later? We've got an AWC tournament coming up and players will be playing with access to all of the gear. So we will know right away what the game is like. And I have been reading some of the tweets from players that are practicing, and they've been tweeting that they're enjoying the pace currently in their war games on practice, which is a really good sign. And then moving into the tournament itself, when we watch the broadcast, we're going to really know, like, where do the classes sit once they're at full gear? How fun is the game going to be at that point? Because it could be a lot of fun. They've definitely upped the ante in terms of how much damage is done. Still think there's a couple of outliers for cooldowns being a little bit too powerful, but I would rather have the game be where, you know, it's threatening, so the intensity of the game is higher, rather than non-threatening. You know, it's a kind of difference between like a pool noodle right? Like I don't want to run around beating people up with pool noodles, waiting for dampening to get high enough so it might leave a bruise on somebody. I would rather be a little bit faster. So I think we got to be a bit careful with how we orient the feedback for it. But I've been having a lot of fun currently playing. I think this Maledict change and the Intervene change are going to be the biggest ones that come through for this. And then when we see the tournament, we're really going to know what the game is going to be like. And then as far as like changes for the game, TBC is getting a lot of changes. In Season 2, I think it's been announced that they're going to be decreasing the amount of honor that it requires for gear. They're going to increase the amount of arena points that you can get per week. They're making the game a lot more accessible. And in my hopes of these changes that are happening for TBC is that we see some stuff like that for retail. Now that we've seen PvP scaling on the PvP gear, separating a bit from PvE, I'm hoping that they can make PvP more accessible on retail as well, because it's just currently feels like a very overwhelming amount of stuff that you need to get done. So you log on, you think about what you need to get done for your character, then by the time you've gotten everything done for your character, you're burnt out, you don't really feel like you got the energy to even do the thing you wanted to do, if you could find somebody to do it with that also had the time to do all the stuff that you just did. So there's a bunch of stuff kind of working against itself when it comes to retail, at least from the group of people that I'm interacting with, and I've noticed for myself personally. So I'm hoping that this accessibility change for TBC that's happening in Season 2 is a good sign or a good indicator that there's potential for trying to make retail in the future more accessible as well. Because either way, I've been pretty happy with the overall direction. Of course, we're working in some very unforeseen circumstances at the moment, so being able to get all this stuff out, get it working, I feel like the game is in probably one of its most fun spots that it's been once you get past all the gearing stuff and you've got a team to play with. Those are the two main culprits of the accessibility problem, where you can be really competitive. I had a lot of fun playing at the moment on my Resto Druid as Shadow Priest Warrior, and I've been noticing a lot of people tweeting about how much more fun they're having with it. And then, of course, it comes with some frustrations, right? Because there's a lot of burst damage. I don't want to diminish that. A lot of the cooldowns are very powerful, probably too powerful. And as a new player, if you don't know what those cooldowns are, you're going to get walked all over them really quickly, which is why it'd be a good recommendation from me to check out some of my videos so you can learn what those cooldowns are, and then you can deal with them when you encounter them. But other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave it with a thumbs up. Comment down below with your thoughts, what's going on with you in World of Warcraft. And other than that, thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next one.